We're joined now by John Davidson. He's my colleague at The Federalist, where he's a senior editor, but for the purposes of this conversation, he's also the author of a new book, Pagan America. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, a lot of our viewers, and actually a lot of the country, is frankly not Christian, not practicing Christian in the way that you write about in this book, and definitely probably looks at this and says, what does pagan America mean? And I'm not even just talking about people on the left. What do you mean by pagan America? And what does that mean for people who aren't right now going to church every Sunday and honestly would hear your description of paganism that you're going to give and say, okay, so it means we've separated church and state. Good.
Yeah, right. Okay, so pagan America is an argument that there's really only one alternative to Christianity, and it's not secularism. It's paganism, right? And I don't mean that in a post-Christian era that we're in, as you say, many people in this country, a growing number of people are not practicing Christians, and a growing number don't even identify as Christians. I think in about 20 or 30 years, we'll have Christianity as a self-identified group, as a minority in this country for the first time ever, right?
And they might hear post-Christian America and think, and Ryan, you probably hear that and you think, okay.
I think, okay, post-Christian America is fine. Part of the argument of the book is that America, as we know it and understand it, is only possible with a Christian people. In other words, a people who accept basic normative claims of Christian doctrine. Chief among them, the doctrine of Imago Dei, that each person is created in the image and likeness of God, and therefore has inherent dignity, from whence we get rights, freedom of speech, religion, consent of the governed, all of the things that we associate with our American system of government and our American way of life are products of Christian civilization. They can't exist on their own outside of that context, right? Outside of that context, they eventually devolve into a form of post-Christian neo-paganism. And that's the era that we're emerging into today. As we shed our Christian civilization, we're also going to shed those things that we associate with our American way of life that I just enumerated. And the reason is because there's no basis for them outside of a Christian moral cosmology that posits, what human beings are and what their relationship to God is and what their relationship to one another should be.
So I pride myself in reading all the books before we interview the author, and I just did not have time to get to this one, so I apologize. So I'm coming in totally kind of blank. But why is that the case? Why can't just appreciation for civic virtue and love of country and just general morality be enough to stitch together a people?
Well, general morality has to be based on something, a vision of the world, or a vision of what human beings are, right? So pagan morality, and this holds true across vast expanses of time and geography and cultures, is that if you are not part of my group, then it's my moral duty to take what you have or subjugate you for the benefit of me and my people, right? And that's what we see over and over again throughout history, the history of pagan peoples and cultures.
Right, so let me ask about, so we've been a Christian nation for a couple hundred years. Mm-hmm. We have launched more wars than any other nation, maybe in history. In the 200 plus years that we've been a country.
We've done some subjugating.
We've done some subjugating. There have been only a few years out of all of those years, even during our isolation, quote unquote isolationist period while we're enacting a genocide, that we were not at war with other people and subjugating them. So either it's not true that Christianity allows us in a meaningful way to see others as equals and treat them as we would like to be treated, or we are just overriding that as an impulse. When is this Christianity going to kick in?
Well, I wouldn't. I want to be careful we don't mistake an ideal for history is contingent and we're never going to attain the ideal of human equality, right? Or a perfect realization of Christian moral ideals. The United States didn't do it. European civilization didn't do it. I don't think anyone's ever going to get it, right? But that doesn't negate the fundamental sort of philosophical and moral claims of Christianity, right? Christianity, as opposed to many other moral and religious systems, does claim an equality between people, and that's where we get things like human rights, the basis for human rights and human dignity.
So why can't you take it out? So like in a post-Christian America, why can't you say we like the ideas that came from Christianity?
Golden rules, golden.
We're taking the Christ out of it, and like we just
a Christless Christianity, in other words, or a secular humanism, right? This is the argument that Steven Pinker or Richard Dawkins would make, right? They want the culture without the cult, but you can't have the culture without the cult, because the culture relies on the religion and the religious claims as the source of its vitality, the source of its coherence, right? Why should a people who are post-Christian retain Christian moral virtues, right? Why should I think that all men are created equal when clearly, in many ways, people are not equal? We see inequality all around us, and why shouldn't we adopt a pagan morality that says, inequality? And this is, the ancient Aristotle said this. The ancient pagans, they understood inequality means that some people are naturally slaves and some people are naturally rulers. And if you're poor, that fate has decided that you should be poor, and that's your lot. Christianity, brought a moral revolution to this pagan morality and this pagan cosmology, and posited a radically new way of understanding the world and our relations. And it launched a radical shift in human civilizations that had never before been seen. And so America is one expression of that, right? And we can have different interpretations of American history. European civilization is, of course, where we came from. But we're entering, and this is what the book argues, we're entering this new sort of unprecedented era, a post-Christian era. And my argument is we should not expect the Christian cosmology, the Christian moral virtues that organized the West for all these centuries to remain intact, cut off from the source of their vitality, right? And we should expect something new. And the new thing we should expect is a resurgence of this pagan mentality, the pagan ethos, which is one that's based on force and coercion.
But I guess I'm still trying to figure out, like I was saying earlier, when does the Christianity kick in? Like if the country's founded on these Christian ideals, and the country had Christians supporting slavery, Christians supporting the ethnic cleansing of Native Americans, Christians supporting the Spanish-American War,
These were departures.
Philippines.
I think these are departures from Christianity.
Absolutely. Okay, let's.
These are departures from the claims of Christianity, right?
It's sort of like true communism has never been tried.
Well,
people mock that idea when actual communists will say,
when's the communism going to kick in?
Yeah, when's the communism? Like you say, well, the Soviet Union wasn't great, Cuba wasn't great. Well, then that wasn't real communism. But communism only had like a 200-year run. Christianity has had 2,000 years.
Right, and well, I don't know about you, but I think that Christianity has produced the greatest civilization the world's ever seen. Right.
Which one's that?
The one that we're sitting in right now, right?
But certainly a fairer and juster world than we've seen before.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right. Consider something like the Roman Empire, right? We have a tendency, I guess, since the Enlightenment, to sort of romanticize the pagan past and the Roman world and the Greek world. Those are slave societies. Most people in the Roman Empire were slaves. They didn't have anything like rights, right? If you were a Roman citizen or a Roman aristocrat, you could do whatever you wanted to people who were in a lower station than you. You could rape them, you could murder them, you could discard them, and it wasn't seen, so far from not being any kind of moral censure, it was like a mark of your rank that you were able to do this. This is true all through pagan societies, as I said, across time and cultures.
Well, what about the Ottoman Empire? What about a lot of the Chinese empire, like throughout Chinese history? Like you had people who had probably far more rights than they had.
Slave societies too.
And abolished slavery later, actually, in most of the Ottoman areas than were in the West. And what's interesting about that, I think, actually, is one of the grossest Christian arguments in favor of slavery in the United States was these are not people. And what's interesting about that is because as soon as you acknowledge these are human beings and you're a Christian, you have to treat them equally as human beings.
Right, which was the abolitionist argument, right?
Well, I was going to say, if you could talk, because that's in the book, about how Christians get blamed for perpetrating slavery. I think rightfully there was a Christian argument that was made in favor of slavery. There's a Christian argument that's made in front of awful imperialism and, to your point, ethnic cleansing. But if you go to if you talk about what happened when Columbus arrived, it was Bartolome de las Casas that was saying this is awful from a Christian perspective.
Yeah. So the debates over, what should the proper disposition of Christian Europeans be toward the indigenous peoples of the Americas. That was a debate that was initiated by Catholic monks and scholars in Spain, right? Who had these
I'm sure
these
the
debates.
indigenous had a view on it too.
No, I'm saying from the European perspective of what should our disposition be toward these peoples in the New World, and there was a debate about their humanity, about what responsibilities the Catholic Church and the Crown had to these people. It was the kind of debate, the fact that they were having a debate about this at all, I would say, is a product of Christian civilization. It's not the kind of thing that would have been debated in a pagan society at all. It would have been absolutely just subjugate these people.
The debates in the Ottoman Empire, the debates in China, debates in Japan, everybody debates.
I'm talking about a debate about whether or not these people should be just enslaved like animals and treated as such, or should their inherent dignity and humanity be recognized as children of God, and our goal should be to bring them.
Greeks and the Romans all debated that.
And did on one side of it.
Aristotle debated he disagreed with the practice, how slavery was practiced, but he accepted at the very beginning of the politics, he accepts the premise of natural slavery and natural rulers. His quibble is with the implementation of it, not with the philosophical position that slavery is a natural state for some people. And this was common, but this was never accepted in Christianity in centuries and centuries of Catholic Europe. It was only in a modern context in the 19th century when the antebellum South posited this very unchristian, very pagan argument that slavery was natural. And it was an aberration, it was a departure from how Christianity had been approaching this issue for centuries and centuries. Not only in the New World
against slavery in 1100.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, the idea of human rights or of peace, that war should be confined and non-combatants should be protected. These were things that medieval Catholic Europe came up with.
That's true, but one reason for that is that these Christians were doing more war than anybody else in history.
Than who? Than Genghis Khan?
Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan's the exception. More war than North Americans, South Americans, Chinese, Africans.
More war than the Aztecs. I don't know. More war than
more
war than the Egyptians, the Comanche.
Yeah. Look around the world. Look at the biggest wars, and the U.S. and Europe.
You're talking about modern, like World War I, World War II.
Yeah, but
if you're talking about, right?
Yeah, but if you look at how far they went.
Well, World War II was a pagan war, right? I mean, Nazi Germany was a post-Christian society. The Soviet Union was a post-Christian society. These were.
Nietzsche's primary argument against Christianity was that it was, in some ways, too.
Think Nazis were pagan?
Equated people. I think Nazis were pagan.
Yeah, Nazis were absolutely pagan. So Nazis were honest enough, like the Marquis de Sade, right, to say, if we're going to reject Christianity, then the Christian morality has got to go. There's no basis to treat people as though they have inherent dignity and worth. Let's just liquidate all these people.
But they tried to keep the trappings. They liked some of the trappings of Christianity, but they quite literally took Christ out of the Christianity.
And didn't they go after the communists as godless?
The Nazis were their god was sort of the pagan Volk, right? This very clearly hearkening back to a pre-Christian, even in their aesthetics, right? It
was Nordic.
There's no sense in which the Nazis were a manifestation of Christian cosmology, right? This was very clearly post-Christian, and so when I say post-Christian, and the reason I say the Nazis were at least honest about it is that if you get rid of the Christian claims, you eventually have to get rid of the Christian morality too. So I mentioned the Marquis de Sade. During the Enlightenment, there was this rejection, overt rejection of Christianity, and specifically attacks against the Catholic Church. The Marquis de Sade said, well, not only should we attack Christianity, but we should sweep away Christian morality as well. There's no reason why the strong should, scrape and bow before the weak. That's against nature, right?
That's what Nietzsche said too.
Yeah, that's what Marquis de Sade. That's what Nietzsche said. That's what the Nazis said, right? And that is what pagan society. That's the principle in which pagan societies had always been organized. And what I'm saying is that Christian civilization was organized on different principles, never fully realized, right? Ideals that we are always moving toward, never quite going to achieve, because this is the world and we're fallen. People are what they are, but the ideal and the claim, the ontological claim about what people are, was fundamentally different than what pagans posited.
Last word, Ryan?
No, go ahead and read this book. But I don't know. I think if the U.S. is held up as the example, as the most Christian nation, that doesn't bode well for linking nationalism and Christianity, just based on our behavior over the last 200 years.
I was going to say what's somewhat interesting about this conversation is that all three of us share very, very similar foreign policy at the moment. So I
don't know what your guys' foreign policy is.
He's a full Leninist. But no, I mean, we pretty much agree on what's happening right now. All that is to say, I actually think this was very helpful to have a conversation from the right. We do a lot on the left. And
we do.
I think it was great to have one from the right. So
well, I appreciate y'all having me on. Read the book, and then we'll come back and talk about it some more.
Looking
and then
forward to
we'll
it.
do a fist fight.
There we go.
It'll be a see who can triumph in a contest of strength.
We're
not pagans.
Not Christian of it.
Well, if you leave me out of it, it would be kind of Christian. It would keep the women, the vulnerable, out of the fist fight. All right, John Daniel Davidson, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.